it's one thing to learn to code and do it all solo, but when you're actually talking to people about code, it just like goes deeper in your brain.
Welcome everyone to the TechGuide podcast, where we give actual advice to those wanting to break into tech or are looking for their next gig. We have Will Cline on the podcast today to talk about his experience with the University of Texas Coding Bootcamp. Will, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You are one of my closest friends in Austin, but I do have a question for you that I've actually never asked you. And that's going to be, because this conversation's around technology, coding, full stack development, I want to talk about where your love for technology come from. So, do you have a specific device or moment you remember falling in love with technology?
I think I first fell in love with it pragmatically. I thought this would be a good career field for different reasons. And then I ended up just falling in love with it, the logic and coding. And then I did a Arduino project, building a smart punching bag, and working with the hardware and the software together. That probably escalated my love for it even more. And I've just love tech now, and it's a whole lifestyle more than just a career, because you can listen to all the podcasts about it. You can talk with other people in the industry.
Yeah, I actually did not know the smart punching bag thing. I have to ask about this. How old were you when you were doing this?
I was like 22, maybe. It was kind of right after college, sort of deal.
Okay, sweet. Well, take me through the smart punching bag. What were some of the features of it? Because I feel like 22, to develop a smart punching bag, that's sick. What were some of the things that you did on this? I did not know this. And everyone, I've known Will for a year.
Yeah, it was kind of a side project back then. It was gamified, and it used sensors to track how tilted the punching bag was. It was a freestanding one, and when you punch it, of course, it would tilt, and based off that, it would give you points, and there's a screen, and you could set game modes and stuff.
That's cool. And I feel like the audience will have me as a punching bag if we don't talk about the University of Texas Coding Bootcamp, which you went through, which I'm excited to talk to you about. So take me through this bootcamp. You had some coding experience prior, but what sparked your interest in going to a bootcamp?
Well, I thought it would help me get a coding job. I had already done a data science bootcamp before, and I'd worked as a data analyst for a while. And I decided I wanted to switch to full stack development. And I had really just taken the data science bootcamp because I wanted to get into tech, and that one was offered. And I was like, that's tech. I didn't know enough about it at the time. Not that it was a bad choice. It was great. But eventually I wanted to be more of an engineering role. And I was having a little bit of trouble getting a job, because even though I had done a lot of projects on my own and had taken a few classes in school and was somewhat proficient in Python, I was not getting a job. So I decided I should take the boot camp to escalate my career there.
Yeah, I feel like that's why so many people do those the boot camps of data analysts or a coding boot camp. It's because they're struggling to find a job, and a boot camp's a great way for you to gain the skills, but also the reputation of the certificate, and hey, I went through this intensive boot camp. So I feel like that's true throughout why people do the boot camps itself.
Yeah, it was great for the credentials, and then it was also great for having that structured learning and learning best practices. Because when you're doing self-taught stuff, you might not end up there's certain things that you just don't know, and this can get you past that really quickly.
I there are things that you don't know. Once COVID hit in March of 2020, I tried to learn coding. I actually had a month into it, but I just kept getting stuck on loops. I think that's what they're called in coding. Python, if I'm recalling from 3.5 years ago, is loops. It was so hard, and being self-taught, there are so many challenges to that, because you need to have a structured plan and you need to lay it out, but there are things, like you said, you don't know.
Yeah, just little things that you really would never think about. Just this is how the file structure, the folder structure typically is for this kind of a project. And Um, this is like a tool that people use, that sort of thing. And I was really, another reason I did it, I was running into a lot of issues trying to do a entrepreneurial project. And I was the technical co-founder, and I was supposed to build the whole thing.
Mhm.
And I was just taking ridiculously long to do this front end stuff because
Yeah.
I didn't have experience with front end. And so I wanted something to accelerate my learning in that way.
Well, take me through like that research. Like, how did you identify UT was that boot camp to accelerate your learning? What research did you do prior to choosing UT?
I just Googled boot camps and I saw that UT had one, and I wanted to do something with such a prestigious name as UT for
Mhm.
tech. And the price range was about the same as that as any other. It's like 15,000. And
Okay.
so I decided to go with the UT one if I could get into it.
What was like, how did you get into it? Is there like an application process? What were some of the ways that, yeah, how did you get into it?
They pretty much just check if you have basic computer competency,
Mm,
and then they'll let pretty much anyone in who
yeah.
meets that criteria.
How basic are we talking? Are we talking
Very,
like
very
copy and
basic,
paste basic or like know
like
how to
that,
code a little bit basic?
like that. Not code, just like basic, like know how to use a web browser, document editor, and stuff.
Okay. So basically if you've grown up in the 21st century, you could be
You're
able to
good.
apply to this and get in.
You'll get in. Yeah, they just want your money. Yeah.
I love
Now,
that.
now it's easy to get in. I'll say it's not easy to pass. It's very challenging boot camp. All boot camps are
Oh,
challenging, but this one was a very challenging one.
okay. So I want to talk about the two things there. So number one, how many people started with the program and how many people then dropped off, would you say, like halfway through?
Well, about 100 people probably started the program, somewhere in that range, and then probably lost 15 or so throughout. And it was just challenging in general. But most people made it through and got the certificate.
So let's talk about like during the time there and those challenges that you faced at the boot camp. Like, let's actually just kick it off. Like, what were some of the projects that you worked on during the boot camp?
Pretty much like gives you it gives you little challenges to code a certain website. It's pretty straightforward. You just code various websites and
Mm.
learn how to use the React and Mern stack.
So you have like you're coding these like websites, but also like what are the like teachers like teaching you while you do this? Like I'm just curious of that balance of like projects, but also like learnings that you get from the professors.
So the way that it's structured is you get this repo that you clone, and there's one activity that the instructor does live and goes through, and then there's another one right after that you break out into breakout rooms on Zoom, and you all do
Mm.
just with your peers, and you do it yourself. So it's like watch, do, and that's the
Interesting.
cadence of it. And then there's 3 or 4 big group projects that happen over the course of a couple days where you just stop the watch do cadence and you just do with a group of peers, and you get to decide to build whatever you want.
Yeah. So what did you build? I know I have a good idea about what you built. Like, yeah, but like what did you build for one of these projects?
We built a video game that had NPC driven AI driven NPC dialogue. So it was like a retro style, um, top down style game, and all the NPCs in the game were driven by OpenAI API.
Mm.
And there were mini games that you could play, like 20 questions and other sort of mini games, all word based with AI.
For this project, then you guys were I think the coolest part of that was like you guys were using like open AIs to like make this an AI driven game with like NPC characters. So like what were these players able to do then with this integration with open AI?
They were able to talk with the NPCs and have more organic dialogue, and they were able to. So the you had to get a bunch of items from different villagers
Mm-hmm.
on this planet, so you could fix your ship and leave the planet. And to get an item from each person, you had to chat with them and get some information, and also you had to sometimes play a mini game and like 20
Mm.
questions or some other word-based mini game, or you had to write a poem that GPT would rank, and if you got like an over 3 out of 5, you would get the thing.
That's so cool. And so how many people were working on you with this project? I feel like this is like a huge project to like take on, especially like if you're doing this intense boot camp. There's a lot going on. So like how many people were you working on with this, and like what were some of your roles that you did in it?
Each group project was like 4 people, and each one was a big learning curve. We definitely were stretched each time we would do a project like that, because we were all building a video game for the first time, and most of the people had never coded at all before the boot camp, so we'd come a long way.
Mm. What did you think? Yeah, that was a question I wanted to ask. Like, because you had previous coding experience, like going into that. So, but would you recommend people have some sort of like coding experience before they go, or do you think people can just really, as long as you know how to copy and paste, you can hop into this thing? Or what would you suggest?
Maybe it depends how good of a student you are. I haven't really developed that good of
Mm.
student skills, so for me, I was struggling. I was up against you know um, the edge of my capabilities, so to speak. I mean, I did great in the boot camp, but I was working really, really hard, and the amount of coding experience I had before it um, really gave me a huge benefit. So, but I think a lot of other people um, who are really good at paying attention in class and who don't have that like ADHD mind, they were doing
Yeah.
it. They were doing okay, but there were some people who came in with no coding experience who just drowned under the sheer you know amount of it all. It really is a lot. Like, it's just how much do you get out of it also. Like, it's
Yeah.
one thing to pass, but how much are you really getting out of it, and are you taking advantage of every little bit of it and retaining the majority of it?
That's what I think would be the hardest for me is like those student skills, because like some people are just like great like in session school like students, and I was never that growing up. Some people just had like a recipe for like doing tests or like completing projects, but that was like literally never me. So yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting point that people need to be like a decent student to do well if you don't have coding experience.
Yeah, it's like you need one or the other, or you're gonna probably fail at it. It's pretty tough.
Mm-hmm. Are there any like two other things that you would suggest people to like know about before, while you're in the trenches of this boot camp, head down, fingers on the keyboard? Is there anything like advice you'd give for people on how to get through it, or like what would you be your best advice on how to get through a boot camp?
I don't really have any other special advice other than just work really hard and have a really positive attitude and connect with your peers throughout it. I mean, a huge portion
Mm.
of the benefit is connecting with your peers and having a network and relationships ongoing after it. And so tap into that and just work really hard, and have a really positive attitude the whole time while you're slogging through it. Because it's only 3 months, so for me, it was really easy to be motivated about something like that.
Yeah.
That's just a sprint. It's more motivational for me, at least, than school, where there's like no end point,
Yeah.
or it's kind of more there's no real specific goal. Like, the goal of a boot camp is to get a job. So
Yeah, and I think that is like really important. And that's why I think boot camps are like so like people want to do them because like they're only, I mean they range in like time frames. So like a 3 month commitment is like relatively small compared to a 4 year education getting a computer science degree. When basically you're coming out with like the same thing of like getting a job, like a high paying job too. Like 15,000 is I feel like very small in retrospect to like what someone with a computer engineering, software engineering career can make really.
yeah, it's 15,000, and that's just like one semester of regular college. And I'd say people who get a computer science degree versus a boot camp, they probably come out with about equal skill sets. Some are better at some things, some are better at others, but it's about equal for way less time and way less pay.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I do want to hit on that networking opportunity that you spoke about, because I feel like that's also another reason people do the boot camps is to network. We had someone on episode like 14 or 15. They did like a data analytics boot camp. They just said the networking opportunities are insane. Like they went to USC data analytics boot camp and they said it's crazy. So can you talk a little bit more about like the opportunities you had to network while you were there with like other people in the class?
Yeah, I came out of it with some good friends from there, um, and I had to work really hard to connect with people because a lot of people are introverts in a program like that, and it was all remote. But there's a lot of work, especially with your group partners for group projects. You get a lot of time working together, and you can get to know each other if you want. And other than that, you're talking with people day to day because you do this watch do cadence, like I was saying. You get paired up in breakout rooms with other people over and over.
Yeah.
So everybody gets to know each other, and even though it's remote, it feels like you do get to know all of them. And I did a data science boot camp as well, and it was in person, and same deal. You come out of it with networking, that kind of thing.
Can you talk about like a remote code, like a remote boot camp versus like an in-person boot camp? If someone's considering, should I do this remotely or should I find one in person? Like what advice would you give them to help guide that?
There's some benefits of both. I mean, for one, if you've never worked remotely before, doing your boot camp remotely can sort of teach you those skills that you might not think about. That is really a skill set of working on Zoom and stuff like that. But being in person is a more visceral experience. For some people, feel more motivated in person and enjoy it more. I personally like in person better, but I was glad that this boot camp taught those skills of how to work remotely.
Yeah, I do love that as well, because I feel like that is like a skill set for the modern age is being able to work remotely. And it does take like some sort of discipline to be able to do that. And going through a boot camp like that, I think, is a perfect way to build that discipline.
Yeah, it's not really intuitive at first. It's a little unnatural when you're on Zoom and all that. But yeah, you get used to it.
And I do want to talk about, so we talked about before the boot camp, what your research looked like. We talked about specifically the boot camp, but another very important component to this is after the boot camp. Sure. So can you tell us, how did the boot camp set you up to be that technical founder, to find a job? How did it give you that skill set to do so?
Both boot camps I've done I've gotten a job directly related to it. So I support boot camps. They've helped me out. I've literally got a job directly related to it. And I came out with just way more confidence and way more skill set. Knew a lot of things that I didn't know going in. And now I'm just a really well-rounded programmer after those 3 months of grinding. And so it was super worth it. And it's one thing to learn to code and do it all solo, but when you're actually talking to people about code, it just like goes deeper in your brain when you're like interacting with peers who are who are doing the same thing. More motivating, more limbic system, you could say. I think employers were just more receptive after that. I'm working on a full-time job now at a startup, and it's directly using the tech stack that I honed during the boot camp of React and Node. And so employers do take that as credibility, as long as you've got other stuff to show for it. It's kind of like if you already are showing them that you're working on coding stuff on your own anyway, and you're like a solid coder, they're like, okay, I could hire this person, but let me look at their resume real quick to make sure they have at least something. And if they see you have at least a boot camp, then it'll validate it. But I think boot campers definitely have to work harder to get a job than if you have a degree. Like if it's one or the other, a degree will get you a job way more. But I overcome that by networking a ton and co-working at a tech space. And so I just get to know a ton of people who are in tech, and I go to a lot of events. So that's one way that if you're if you just have the boot camp, or even if you don't have a boot camp at all, you could really up your chances of getting a job without a degree.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, if an employer is looking at someone that did a degree versus a boot camp, like they might right now favor the degree, but like I think it's also really important, like they don't overlook these boot camps, because it is a validation of like, hey, this person did 3 months of a UT boot camp, like that's amazing, like sign me up, get that guy on our team. So yeah, I think that is it's a very validating thing to do, and I think that's why people do it. They are wanting to pivot careers, and it's a perfect way to do it, to get that job in a career that you want to do.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more and more recognized as a valid way of educating yourself over time, as there's more information on the internet. And I feel like the dominance of the college degree as a indicator is gonna lessen over time, because there's just no reason to actually be in a 4-year college in the same way that they're used to pre-internet. You can get all the same resources online. There is the benefit of having that accountability structure in the peer group.
For sure.
That's super crucial and important, but it's more like an accelerant than like you can still get the same things without that.
And do you feel like your boot camp, do you feel like in your job now, like your full-time job, like you just have to feel like that solid foundation, or is there anything missing from like the knowledge that the boot camp didn't hit on that you wish you had, or how did the boot camp prepare you for that job to succeed?
Well, it doesn't get you everything. It doesn't get you all the way, but it gets you everything you need to just like get started. You could build stuff on your own, and it prepares you to be a junior developer. No more than that, but it's a really solid foundation.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome talking about the UT boot camp. Where can people connect with you? Where can people find you? Please plug it all. You're a great friend here in Austin, so I'd definitely recommend it. But yeah, please plug your LinkedIn or anything like that.
Okay, yeah, my LinkedIn is LinkedIn/in/Will R. Cline. Will R. Cline. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Perfect. Thank you, Will. Thank you so much for joining us. Awesome conversation about UT boot camps before, during, and after. So yeah, thank you so much.